Hello, welcome back to IASA's Virtual Leadership Series. Our topic today is how to network and get exposure while you're working from home. I'm Darren Reffitt, Director of Product Marketing Excellence with Guidewire and Chair of our e-learning program at IASA. I'm here, as usual, with Kathy Elwood, the founder of Elwood Enterprises, and Carrie Crockett, the CEO of IASA. So, Kathy, Carrie, welcome back. We're heading into fall. It's starting to get colder. We're starting to spend a little more time in our homes, and yet you still can't see everyone you want to because we're still in our post-COVID world. So today's topic, very near and dear to my heart, networking. How do you network and gain exposure in a world that's so virtual? Like, I've seen a lot of bad attempts at this. I get tons of people on LinkedIn sending me messages that start with, hi, I wanted to check in, see how you're doing. Hopefully COVID hasn't impacted you and you're surviving the new normal. And by the way, I'd like to sell you something. So can we connect on LinkedIn? And they start so sincerely, and yet they ramp downward pretty fast into something that I just don't even bother with. So I think this is an important topic right now, right? There's a lot of us trying to achieve a lot of different things via networking. And, you don't want to be out of sight. People may still be looking for new job opportunities, especially if they've been affected by issues around, work and employer layoffs. So what used to work probably isn't as easy as it used to be, but it's still so necessary for our careers. So why don't we start with you, Kathy? Well, all of that bundled up into one question. How do you think COVID's impacted the way people need to network?
So obviously it's impacted everything that we've done for the most part, and especially with networking, because most of the time when we network, it's usually face-to-face. And in this world, what I'm finding is that we really need to make good use of the technology and the tools that we have available. And from my perspective, I think it's important to be patient. You can't expect immediate answers, particularly when you don't know what's going on in their lives. You raised that point about the emails, like, how are you? Well, I think that we need to step back and realize that a lot of people have been impacted personally by COVID. And it's almost insensitive to say, how are you? Just wanted to reach out to see if you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Well, guess what? They may not be. They may be having to deal with their families. They may be having to deal with, situations where somebody they love has been, they've died from COVID. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that in an email or a text or whatnot? Rather than saying, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Maybe instead is, hey, I wanted to reach out and see how you're holding up through all of this. You shift the tone through your verbiage just a little bit. And what I've found, and I think it's hitting all of us at some point in time or another, is that 40% of people in this country feel that their emotional well-being is worse off than it was pre-COVID. So if that's the case, and I actually think that number might be low. If that's the case, that doesn't mean that only 40% of the lower level people in the organization are impacted. That's 40% of all of us. So let's keep that in mind when we're thinking about networking, because there are no boundaries. Carrie, what do you think?
Absolutely, I agree with that. And yet 80% of the people find their next opportunity because of networking. So it's really something that we all need to learn to do, even if we do work from home. It's just that critical. I found that, I really have to make it a personal priority, just treating it like it's a project, like anything else. So what I mean by that is really that I have to schedule that time to do it. I have to put chunks on my calendar where I block out that time so others can actually book time around there, so that I can really figure out the best way to go about it. And really, you have to consider there are so many options now that are available to us to make networking a possibility. I've also found that it's really extremely important to have a personal networking plan and make those goals that you can reflect upon. For example, if I'm planning to reach out to, say, 10 people a week in an email, I have to think back, did I do that? Did I make those calls that I intended to make and really make those connections? How many face-to-face virtual meetings did I initiate now? I will say, in the time of COVID, it has been more than we all probably want in any given week or day. But you have to really think about the quality of those, and did they have the impact that I hope that they had from that networking standpoint? Did I post something of value on LinkedIn? I mean, I think those are all questions that we need to step back at the end of the week and really give thought to.
Those are all great ideas. I mean, I struggle to think about how I would have dealt with what I went through, a year ago, where I was in the midst of a job change, having been laid off and gone to an IASA meeting. And I talk all the time about how IASA has changed my career for the better. But in that case, it was a very direct example where I went to an IASA planning meeting, mentioned that I was being laid off at the end of the month. And, I was set up with a contractor role here at Guidewire within a couple of weeks with someone I networked with at IASA. And in the virtual world, that probably wouldn't have happened the same way. So these are great ideas for the process, but let's talk a little bit about how you do it. I mean, it's so much easier when you're at a meeting like that to mention to someone that you're open to new opportunities, or, walk up to someone and invite them to coffee, stuff you just can't do. So how do you do that today and still bring a level of sincerity to it?
So, Darren, I actually think you're right. I think it is difficult, and I think person to person is much easier. There's no doubt about that. But let's step back for a minute. Networking has been hard for people for a long time before COVID. A lot of people just don't feel comfortable doing it, especially people that are introverts, like myself, for example. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is they don't consider networking at work real work. In fact, they think it's just taking a break or going to lunch. And, to Carrie's point earlier, it is real work, and you've got to treat it like real work. So how do you deal with that then? If your mind says one thing and your actions say another, what I found and what I've advised people to do frequently, and it works, is to have a deliberate purpose. So that's actually work related. So when you're setting up that contact, you've got a reason for that person to say yes, potentially, and you feel a lot more comfortable initiating the meeting. So when you initiate it, you could possibly say, well, I'm looking to better understand your organization because I'm considering career options. I'd like to talk to you about, how you got to where you're at, or pick a project, a strategic objective that you're working on that would benefit from that cross-functional knowledge. I have to share with you a little short story about my daughter. So she actually started at a company on the same day as the chief risk officer. And so they went through onboarding together, which was really cool. And, she became friends with him eventually, in that she wound up working for him in the compliance area. And so with COVID, it changed everything. Prior to COVID, she'd occasionally see him in the elevator. Hi, how are you? The typical networking stuff. But after COVID, she's working from home. So what does she do? What she actually did, we talked a little bit about it, if it actually would make sense or not. And I said, why don't you just check in on him? Check in on, how things are going from a higher level. Does he need any help? Is there anything that he's found different and unique about trying to lead organizations, working from home? And just, talk about some of the projects you've been working on and how COVID has impacted your organization. So believe it or not, she took my advice, and within a month, and I don't think it was coincidental, maybe it was, but when the promotion opportunities came around, her name was on the list and she got a promotion. So, and that's since COVID, which I thought was pretty amazing. So, I mean, that doesn't happen all the time, but out of sight, out of mind.
So, Kathy, that's actually a really great example of authenticity in motion. It was clear that her authentic self came out, and that actually was conveyed to him. And so it really, in the end of the day, it had a really positive impact for her and her career. So the point there is, it's really not about what they can do for you. It's about what you can do for them. How can you have that positive impact on them? Kathy made a great point about tying it to purpose as well. And I think that's really a great idea. People are just so busy these days, and they really don't have the time to spend unless it's a value add for them. I mean, we've all seen that. We feel it ourselves too. I think, really having to make that transition from being an option to being a priority. And you have to convince people that you're worth knowing. Sometimes you just have to be creative to make that happen. You got to link it to those strategic objectives, link it to wanting to improve knowledge around their area, and anything that gives them that opportunity to want to meet with you, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, so I will throw out one thing I saw that was really great. One of my peers in our product marketing team shared a post on LinkedIn recently that just said, hey, if you're being affected by COVID, if you're looking for a new job opportunity and I can be of any assistance, if you're someone that, we work closely together and you need a reference, please feel free to reach out and I'll see what I can do to help you. And what was great about it was it got so much traction. Not even from people necessarily looking for work, but it just other people were sharing it, commenting on it. So that LinkedIn connection can be used in a number of different ways right now to just stay top of mind and also to be of help to people who may need it and feel uncomfortable reaching out. I've been meaning to share a post similar myself, and this is my reminder to do it. So I guess my final question is, what are some other ways that you can stand out, that you can get recognized in a time where it may be hard to get that facial reminder that you're there? Carrie, why don't we start with you on that one?
Well, you just talked about LinkedIn, and absolutely, if you're in the business world, I mean, that's really the key place in terms of social media products that you want to make sure that you're active on. So really on that broad level, make sure that you're active on social media, especially LinkedIn, posting that new content, commenting on other people's comments and posts as well. Think about branding your online bio. So, create that story rather than just list your accomplishments. It really helps you to connect human to human instead of just listing out those things that people kind of get bored reading on. You got to create that story. Think about the use of video as well in terms of communication instead of just sending text or posting and that kind of stuff, because that really allows, again, that human connection to form, even though it's through a video medium. I would think as well as you're having those conversations with people and you're trying to network virtually, stay current on the news. There's things that always are going to come up in conversations that you can use as icebreakers, the weather, business, sports, try to steer clear of politics. But, other than that, all of those types of things come up in normal conversation, and they're really great to break that ice. And then I think if you're thinking about within your organization and how you want to make sure that you're networking with your peers, your colleagues, with new folks in your business, be active in those Zoom meetings that you do have, and make sure that you're speaking up, raising your hand, commenting when it makes sense to do so. Please don't speak just to be speaking, because that also comes through as not being authentic as well. But just give some thought to how you are responding in those meetings. And since time is really limited in virtual networking situations, you want to stay focused. You want to make sure that you're succinct while you're being authentic. So think about what you're saying and then add value to that. I think this is one thing that I share with my team all the time, which is be fully present, right? It's very easy to be glancing over email or to be responding to something else, or you have a text come in on your phone or your office phone is ringing. Show others that you're really paying attention, really fully be present in that moment. It makes a huge difference to somebody else on the other end. I think you can also express gratitude and recognize the achievements of others and make sure that you're commenting on anything that happens in their life. I mean, just show them that you're paying attention to what's happening and that you care about what's going on in their lives. And then finally, just think about seeking out those opportunities that are going to allow you to connect. So volunteer for those assignments that no one else wants, take those notes, just really raise your hand and be a part of that team in any way that you can.
So, one of the things, you raised something really intriguing. One of the things that we used to do when we work in offices together is, we'd have chit chat about the Lakers last night, for example. So what do you guys think about them? They won, right?
Mm-hmm.
We forget that in this environment. We forget to ask, to talk a little bit about things that are going on in our lives. And I think it's a really important point to make, because that was the stuff that, helped us to identify commonalities, the things that we enjoyed together, the things that maybe we didn't enjoy together. And we're forgetting that. And I know we've talked about this before, but it's so much harder to build trust in the virtual world. And I'm finding that, even before COVID, but how do you build a relationship? We've talked about, it's important to deliver on your commitments, but the personal side is really important. Taking time to get to know the individual, who they are as a person. What do they enjoy? How did they get to where they're at? One of the things that I have found, and it's very uncomfortable at first, especially when you're not the meeting facilitator, but take time at the beginning of all the meetings to introduce yourself or to butt in, to the meeting facilitator and say, hey, I'm not really sure who all the people are. Can we just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about our backgrounds? And, to Carrie's point, be succinct, but I think it's just important to know who you're dealing with. The other thing that I think that I've found to be very helpful, especially when you're trying to build relationships and when you're networking, is making sure you understand their issues and their concerns from their point of view. And sometimes I know we want to be succinct, but sometimes I think it helps to repeat back in their words your understanding of it, because all of a sudden they think, wow, she gets me, he gets me. So, it takes a little bit more time in the meeting, but you come out of the meeting with a better result. So there's another one. We talked a little bit about out of sight, out of mind. I personally think you can use recency bias to your advantage, particularly in this world, because the more they see you, the more you're going to be in their mind. So in other words, what I'm saying here is make sure you're always working on something that requires you to actively participate and to speak up. Carrie said, volunteer to take the notes. The power of the pen gives you a lot of control that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise had. So don't be afraid to be that person who does. She also mentioned take initiative. What she didn't mention, and I think this is one that really can help you gain a lot of exposure, it can help you be more productive, and it can help you help others even more. And that's becoming an expert in the tools. Like knowing what the tools that you're using can do for you. Like, for example, Zoom. There are all kinds of settings on Zoom that I never knew about until somebody told me. And I'll always be very grateful to those individuals for having done so. And if they ever need something from me, I'm going to go out of my way to help them. And I think you're going to see that the more you're an expert, the more people rely on you and the more you become that person that they go to. And it never hurts to be that go-to person. So yeah, those are the things I would be thinking about in this world.
It's as we're having all this discussion, it's dawning on me that, we talk about how different networking is, but in reality, we're changing the medium. We're not necessarily changing what we're doing. And it's just finding creative ways to leverage the new normal and be the same person we were in the office working from home. So, let's just to your reference about taking the initiative, stepping up for the projects, being visible. Those were the ways to succeed in the old world as well. So before we go, are there any final thoughts anyone would like to share? Carrie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Your point is absolutely right on target, Darren, and that is, building those deep connections with people is really challenging in that virtual world, but it's not impossible. Really to make that happen, you just have to add that art, you have to add heart to your interaction, and really connect regularly, just making sure that you are reaching out on a regular basis and touching those people around you.
All right, Kathy.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. And one thing that really has hit me is a lot of the technology vendors have worked from home forever. They're on the road all the time. They're used to working from home. Seek out people like that and call them up or send them a note, have a Zoom meeting and ask them how they've dealt with it. How do they build relationships? Because particularly those who are in sales, and I realize they have a natural tendency to want to reach out to people anyway, but find out how they're doing it and recognize that this is something that you have to do deliberately. You have to consider it real work. And I know I've said this more than once, plan the work the plan. And that's the best advice I can give to you.
And that's definitely good advice. Well, to those of you in the audience, thanks again for joining us. Feel free to tweet at us at IASA Inc., IASA INC, or to me at DMREFFITT, DMREFFIT. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave comments on our YouTube channel. Are there other topics you'd like to hear about from us? Meanwhile, we'll see you next time when we're going to be jumping into how leadership competencies are changing in a virtual world. Thanks so much and stay safe.